up? It's Way Up with Angela Yee, and I am here with Lieutenant Governor of New Jersey, Tahesha Way. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Angela.
To Way Up. We were having a conversation. I was like, hold on, save it. Because we both were English majors in college.
Yes,
You went
indeed.
to Brown University, which is where my brother went, and I went to Wesleyan. And you said, what did your parents tell you about your major, English?
Yeah, the first thing they said is, Tahesha, what you gonna do with that?
Mm-hmm.
So, I had to say, well, Mom and Dad, there's plenty you can do with an English degree, and here I am.
Right,
So
it worked. You know
for
what?
you too.
I thought I was going to be a teacher for a little while. And, that's important if you want to teach. And I did this whole urban education semester. But I will say that English is important. Being able to write and to be able to read and comprehend things quickly, that major helped me a lot when it comes to that. Because I think the skill of being able to effectively write something, whether it's a proposal or, a marketing or deck, whatever it is that you need, that is definitely something that a lot of people, I think, are not up to par on.
No, 100%. I tell you, for me, similarly so, I was actually conflicted my junior year of college because I, too, was thinking education, perhaps becoming like a college English professor. And then my dean at Brown, Dean Perry Ashley, still out there, hello, he said to me, well, with an English degree, Tahesha, you can do so much. You've analyzed things, you've researched, you write all the time. So I've even seen you on campus advocating for various needs. So why don't you think about law school?
Ooh.
Yeah. So it all crystallized. And, at that time, too, during that summer, I had just finished pledging Alpha Kappa Alpha.
Okay.
So I want to shout out to my fellow SOARs and, of course, the entire Divine Nine. But afterwards, I want to say several months afterwards, I suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, Angela. And with that's when it really crystallized for me as to what I wanted to do. And law was top of mind.
I saw that you had that hemorrhage, and I want to talk about that because health is important, right?
It is.
And how did you? Is that something that anybody could ever predict? Is there a way that could have been prevented, or is that something that happens and it's just out of the blue?
Yeah, and I'm thankful that we're lifting up this conversation because I had what they call an AVM. We always hear about aneurysms, but not an AVM. So for me, I was genetically born with an abnormal vessel in the back of my neck. And no, there isn't any mechanism right now in funding for folk to actually, get screened because I'd never had any migraines growing up, no headaches, any, visual distortion or anything like that, mobility issues. But all of a sudden I was at on Jones Beach in New York and at one of the Greek picnics, July 4th, and I all of a sudden felt like someone had struck me hard in the head.
Wow.
And that's when it occurred. And then several days later, I woke up, and that's when I saw my mom and dad surrounded around me in the hospital. And when you witness your dad with tears, I was saying to myself, oh, my goodness, this is it, right? But that's when a stranger who became my neurosurgeon, Dr. De Los Reyes, I will always remember him. He said in a polite way, we're going to help you out. Thankfully, you're able to survive here, but you have suffered that AVM, a cerebral hemorrhage, and it's around your visual cortex. So right now, what we're going to try to do is save your vision.
Right. Ooh, well, listen, a blessing that you're here and been able to serve the way that you have. And it feels like service to the community is something that has always been your path when it comes to everything you've done. I know your parents both work for New York City Transit.
Yes,
that's
they
where my
did.
mom works. I know, we're very aligned on it because you're actually from the Bronx.
I sure am.
And then moved to New Jersey.
Yes.
Now, what brought you to New Jersey with your family?
Well, it was my husband at the time. He and I met at Virginia. He got drafted by the New York Football Giants, so go
Okay.
blue. And that's why it became full circle with us heading back to, because he's from Philly. So it was central New Jersey between New York and Philly.
Okay. And so then so let's talk about you. You get out of college and then you're told, you said your dean was like law school, kind of put that idea in your head.
Yes, he did.
So what did you think was going to happen after that?
Yeah, at that time, and again, it's when the cerebral hemorrhage happened after that conversation in that season of my life, getting back to your point, and you said it so well, Angela, I came to an awareness of, you know what, I am not a science girl. I'm not a math girl, so I don't want to get into, practice any medicine. But what I can do in hopes to have an impact to others is to go to law school, right? And focus on advocating, right? And making other people's lives whole. And for me, once my husband, Charles, he got drafted, we were in the area. I started getting involved in some nonprofit, work and just trying to uplift, especially women's causes.
Yes.
And I guess, word got around, oh, she's really engaged out there in the streets, right? And that's when, it evolved for me because to become, a governmental official, because I never sought public office. I never did.
I want to ask you about that too. But, all right, a couple of things here. I have a couple of other types of questions. First of all, were you cool with like other wives when your husband was playing in the NFL?
Yes, I was. And you know something? two of them are still my BFFs.
That's dope. That whole network. And you're an AKA. So you definitely, I can see already how much you want to uplift other women, because I think that is important. And then second thing that I want to talk about, I saw that Arnold Schwarzenegger today decided that he's going to endorse Kamala Harris for president. But in this long letter that he wrote, because this is his first time stepping out of his Republican camp to endorse a Democrat for president. He's never done that before, right? And he's a Republican. He said a lot of things about how he thinks that politics is, awful, politicians are liars, and it's corrupt and all of that. What were your thoughts about politics before you decided to become essentially a politician?
Well, I was approached through my local county Democratic Association, and I really had to self-reflect, right? Because I never pursue opportunities if I really don't have a heart for it. And at the time, I pursued it. I have 3 little girls.
Right.
And my husband, he wasn't playing for the Giants, but he nonetheless was working for the Giants in their front management office. So he was still traveling and around the country with the team, fully engaged. So our top priority is always my kids. So I start with that. And I wanted to make sure that I would have the bandwidth to do this. I was serving or working as a civil litigator too at the time, which requires a good amount of focus in and out of the courtroom, making sure your clients' needs are met. But, I self-reflected on this and I said, you know what, this opportunity will not come my way. And it's another way for me to make an impact. And I was, and I'm going to keep it real for you. I was saying to myself, I'm a female and I'm a minority female. And the one thing that I appreciate is when I go into spaces, right? And I see folk who look like me.
Right.
We love everybody, but you just want to seek that same comfort. I often tell folk, as growing up in the Bronx or as a little girl, I was hurt when I would just go to a local toy store, right? And I never saw a doll that looked at me during that time. And, my parents did their best. They would always try to bring me back to the toy store. My dad went above and beyond, not only to get me one Cabbage Patch doll, but he actually was able to find an African-American Cabbage Patch doll.
Yeah, they were not so easy to come by.
I still have hers enclosed. She's not even open.
And you know her name? Does she have the papers? They used to come with the little adoption papers.
Those adoption. I don't eat. That thing is not even open. I don't even know what her name is.
You don't know her name?
But she's up in my attic somewhere.
Mine was Odetta Chrissy.
Love it.
That's the name she came with.
I know, and they smell so good, right? So I think that for me, I said, okay, I'm going to do this because, if you look at our history and the challenges that we have had voting, being in positions, right? I think that it was my time, and that's why I decided to, throw my hand in the ring and actually be a county commissioner, as they called her.
That's great, because I do feel like it's important for people to rally up and support people who they think would be good in office. Because sometimes you may not think that that's something you even fathom doing, but when people are like, you would be great for this. And because I think not often enough we feel like we can get very turned off by politics and by politicians. There's been a lot happening in Jersey politics in these past couple of years, too, that is different than it's ever been. Like, I see a lot of the headlines. My parents live in New Jersey.
Oh,
so
okay,
in South Orange.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I always am looking at what's happening in New Jersey, of course, what's happening in New York, because I live in New York. But I always tell people, if you don't like what's going on, you should figure out if you want to run or if you know somebody who you think would be good to run, because you do want people to represent you. Someone's going to do it.
Yeah.
So why not let it be somebody that actually cares and has your best interests, in mind. So that's why seeing you doing what you're doing, and even watching Kamala Harris run for president. I know this is more of a personal conversation. This doesn't have to do with politics, but I've heard people say such awful things about, a woman running for president, a black woman running for president. I've heard people say, I'm not voting for no Indian lady, or a woman can't run this. I've heard women say, I don't want a woman to be president. And she'll be emotional and like all kinds of crazy things. And so for you, because when she became vice president, I did get emotional, and I didn't anticipate that happening when she did become vice president. What are your thoughts now, seeing how the country and how people are reacting to the potential of having a black woman be president?
Yeah, well, I'm going to take off my Secretary of State hat, right? Because I have to, operate on a different lane with that one. But I can just say it brings such pride. I've been honored and blessed to serve as one of her campaign surrogates in the battlegrounds, just making sure everyone understands who she is and what she can bring to the table. And I think that we're at a time in which we should not even be looking at the party, right? Or even if this is a male, a person of color, a female. We should just be looking at who is the most qualified to lead. Who can set a standard, Angela, for our kids? I mentioned at that time when I was practicing, I was a county commissioner. I had 3 girls at that time. Now I have 4, and one is 10 years old. And you say to all of our kids, right, this is the highest position in the land. A standard should be set for our kids as to not only what can they become, but what you are supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do, how you are supposed to be treated others. And again, I look at her qualifications, right? Sound qualifications, having been a district attorney, state attorney general, fighting the fight just for the common people, the everyday people, regardless of where you come from or who you are. I look at the standard of her, not
having sexually assaulted anyone,
and not being a predator, right, and not tearing folk apart. And the thing about it is that if voters really look at her economic platform, it's for everyone,
right,
to make sure everybody can get ahead. So, I have 2 daughters who are older, who have graduated and have gone on. And, you look at them and, sometimes they have to think about, okay, I have to find a roommate nowadays, right? In terms
of, or maybe 2 or 3.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. And this is what our college graduates are facing. But, one of her policies is to make rental right? Making that more affordable, right? For the millennials, Gen Z, whatever generation we're talking about.
Even buying a
Investing.
home.
Exactly. That initial investment of the $20,000, $25, making sure that thousands of dollars can be, in, right, for
Student loan debt.
there you go.
That's a big one right there. Brown's not cheap.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no.
I remember,
It's
neither is Wesleyan. I remember my last payment for my student loan and how excited I was to get that. And I remember deferring my loans, though,
Yes.
several times.
Yes.
And still having to have those accrue and having an even bigger payment when they kick back in.
correct. Because, of course, there's a value to education, but once you graduate, that's like another mortgage,
Right.
right? That you have to assume. And so when you really think about all of her policies so that everyone can get ahead and just have the simple idea of being valued is, what she, and it speaks from the heart.
I've heard people say that Donald Trump, the economy was better under Donald Trump, and they had more money in their pockets, and gas was cheaper, groceries were cheaper. What do you say when people say that? Because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of times even Trump himself will have to get fact-checked on things that he says, but it's still out there. And I think that in his mind, and I know he's said this before, if you say something enough times, people will think it's true.
Yeah.
Even if it's not. He has a marketing background. So for people who aren't going to be digging in and doing the research, maybe they're like, I'm not an economist, but I do feel like I had more money at that time. What would you say to those people?
I just think that people should not fall for misinformation out there. And I think that people really have to remember, right, the times under his tenure. And if you really think about it economically, I don't think that we were better off, right? You see, people say, oh, well, we received the checks, but everyone has to understand Congress was the one with Donald Trump just slapping his name on that check.
He actually didn't want that to happen. And Congress passed that.
Exactly.
And sent those and had those checks. And he actually delayed those checks so he could put his name on them.
Exactly. And that's for real. And, I look at how 300,000 Black Americans were taken off of the healthcare rolls, if you will, under his administration the first 2 years. That unemployment for African Americans was higher. And these are the things that, again, we must continue to get that message out because these are the facts.
What are some things that you personally have faced when it comes to being in the position that you're in, being the Secretary of State, being the Lieutenant Governor appointed by Governor Murphy? What are some of the challenges that you think you face just simply for existing? Do you get a lot of people saying, because I always feel like in politics, anytime we've done interviews with certain people, or I remember being on Fox News, years ago, and I was like, ooh, I don't know if I could handle this, because the amount of vitriol and the crazy things that people say to you, because of the opinion that you have or things that you may state or how you feel about stuff is absolutely ridiculously hateful. It actually could feel dangerous at times.
Yeah, well, first I just want to say I'm very grateful to be in Governor Murphy's administration, having been since 2018, as Secretary of State. And the reason why I say this is because you're surrounded, right, by an administration that is truly inclusive, that is authentic. So you walk into the space with your colleagues, your cabinet colleagues of different genders and races, and it's embraced. Because that's what our policies of the administration has been, following the stronger and fairer that Governor Murphy says. I think that, and I tell young girls this all the time, that in any position, government, politics, whatever, you're going to still nonetheless be challenged. But that is why, unfortunately, as much as we don't like to say it, but it's the truth. We like to speak truth. You have to make sure that you are the most educated person in the room in what you do.
Right.
I've told my daughters this, when our second daughter, she was a competitive figure skater, right? And we know that minority women really are not in that sport. And so I would always say, Farrah, you're going to have to work 10 times harder. And that's why we also have to make sure our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed too. I still remember before I became Secretary of State, I served as a state administrative law judge. And, at times there would be challenges because I was a younger judge too. So I don't know for certain whether or not it was female, whether it was my age
Probably
at the time,
all of the things.
or my gender, but I would get challenged.
Right.
And that's why I took great pride in knowing that none of my written decisions ever went up to the appellate division because I did the
my
work.
Yeah.
I did the work. You do the work. So, you look at all of those things and it is what it is. But I think that each of us were made for such a time for an assignment and to do.
And along those lines, let's talk about this mental health bill that you passed. Because I feel like this all does tie together because mental health is so important, especially no matter what it is, like you said, that you do. You'll be challenged and you have to, dot your I's, cross your T's, make sure that you really know the work and do the work. But at the same time, how do you take care of yourself when things are happening that are outside of your control at times and how you react to things? So you did sign this mental health bill. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, that was pride and joy having signed that because it's kind of personal for me, given I have, the daughters who have gone through college and one is actually a senior now. And it's a lot of pressure that goes on with that. So with that legislation.
They lived through COVID, these kids.
Exactly, they did. They lived through COVID. And, college is very competitive, too. So, the legislation was just speaking to the heart of all of this, making sure our college students, right, would not have a stigma if they needed help, making sure that there's annual training on campuses so that the staff, so that the RAs can have a better awareness and education on, mental health.
Right.
And being proactive instead of reactive. And what we also did, myself alongside the higher education secretary, I want to say during the spring of this year, we made the announcement of the 24/7 telehealth services because sometimes you want your privacy, if you will, just to discuss. You don't want to head to student services because you never know who's going to see you. So you have that other layer of comfort, the college students, because we're always saying our students are our future, which they are. They are present in my eyes, too. But we want to make sure that they're whole and that their needs are met.
I wish we would have had these services when I was coming up. I feel like it's it's an evolution, though. I feel like as people are learning more about it and it's getting a lot more acceptable, there used to be this stigma around that. Lastly, I saw you early voting, right, on the day that early voting opened up. So we want to make sure that everybody knows to go out and vote. You can vote early. So
vote early.
Yeah, vote early if you can. Are you nervous about seeing stories about ballot boxes set on fire? And I thought about it. I'm like, what happens to those ballots that get destroyed after that? Because we've seen a couple of different instances now where that's happened. And because I feel like that can make people feel concerned. Like, well, I voted early and my vote got my ballot got destroyed. Now what happens?
Yeah, I can't, speak about how every other state conducts their safety protocols or security protocols. I just know I'm loving the early vote records that we're setting in New Jersey. I think this past weekend we surpassed our total early voting throughout the years because we started in 2021 with the in-person early voting. I also, I reassure voters, and from day one, ever since, I took office, I've sat down, and this is not partisan. It's with all of the governmental law enforcement and safety folk, from the FBI to Homeland Security, both federal, both state, both attorney general's offices, and also USPS IT folk, just making sure that we shore up the integrity of our infrastructure, and just making sure that, our ballot boxes, we always tell voters they're 24/7 surveyed, right? And that they can track their ballots, and to have like that open line of communication, because I think that that's what voters want. They want you to meet them where, they are, right? And explaining and educating them what should we do. And I just think overall everyone is very focused upon the security and integrity of this election. This is a very consequential election, if not the most consequential election ever in our history. But at the same time, I still want to encourage New Jersey voters to vote for for the school board, right? Elections. I want them to vote for the fire district elections, all of the local races too.
I tell people, before you go, look at who's on your ballot, and that way when you go, you know who's running, you know who you want to vote for. Look it up ahead of time, so that when you go there, you're not just like guessing or just picking something in a column. You know who your candidates are and who you're going to vote for.
Exactly. But again, I thank all of those who have voted, New Jersey voters. I was online, for a while.
So
The lines were wrapped around. I visited a polling location, and I credit the voters because everybody was content. Nobody was angry. Oh, why is this line so long? And what are they doing wrong? And everyone was actually, saying wow and socializing. Yeah, I loved seeing that they were having, as they're satisfying, the civic duty and responsibility.
Well, thank you so much, Secretary of State of New Jersey, Lieutenant Governor of New Jersey, and maybe one day Governor.
I focus on what I do. Right? That's what I do.
She's looking around like,
right. I focus seriously.
But, I know you're also thinking ahead.
No. You know what, Angela, as I mentioned before, I focus on the task at hand, being Governor Murphy's partner. And it's been, it's been a blessing, right, working alongside him and the administration for the great 9.3 million New Jerseyans.
I'm sure he would definitely put his support behind you, though, when that day comes.
Well, I don't speak for anything like that. I just know. I know what I do, and I do it on behalf of his administration. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. One day we have to talk to Charles to see what it was like with him in the house with four girls and his wife.
And a dog. We have a dog, a male dog.
Oh,
so
okay,
he
has
his comfort with that.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Again, you guys, make sure you get out and vote. Let's not play any games, y'all. It's way up.